Welcome back to the Untangled podcast, where we take an inquisitive look at some of the conspiracies surrounding the great mysteries of our time. One of these mysteries we'll be looking at today is Amelia Earhart. In 1947, she embarked on what she thought would be her greatest achievement, circumnavigating the globe at the equator. However, this would also be her last achievement as, on the penultimate leg of the trip, she disappeared mysteriously. Did she simply crash into the ocean? Did she become a castaway? Or did she become something even more conspiratorial? Join us as we talk about that today. And if you like this content, please leave a like and drop a subscribe. Any support is appreciated. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Untangled podcast, where we take an extemporaneous look at some conspiratorial beliefs and theories from around this globe. Han, how have you been doing? I know it's been quite a while since we did our last
It
episode.
has been a while, yeah. Well, I have been extremely busy the last month. I was just finishing up my studies and finding a job and all that shebang. So honestly, I've been completely out of it in the last 2 weeks. I've just kind of been.
You could have said you crashed and burned. Well, maybe not burned, but
I didn't really burn, but I did crash. The last 2 weeks, I definitely crashed in the most metaphorical sense of the word.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I've been crashing the last week because June was pretty hectic for me at work too. So, yeah. At least we can expect for, the listeners, we're going to have a few more episodes coming up for you throughout the summer. So that should be a lot of fun. Keep your eyes out for that. As you know, our lives settled down a bit. But talking about people whose lives never settled down, we have a beautiful guest with us today. Hannah, do you want to introduce who you are and what brings you to this conspiratorial podcast?
Hi, so I'm Hannah. I got invited by you, so I'm as clueless as everybody else going into this, and I'm just here for the ride.
Yeah, because we at this podcast, we like to look at, some historical event or some current event sometimes that has some question marks around it. But before we unveil this topic to our beautiful listeners who cannot read, because I assume you know what the title is, but before we reveal it, let's warm up a little. I want to ask you guys, what's the most lost you've ever gotten?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because I was thinking about this as I was biking home from a tremendously long bike trek I somehow committed myself to earlier today. But I was like, I'm pretty good at not getting lost as a general, like never like catastrophically lost.
That's my problem too, because I don't generally get lost. Like I always manage to somehow keep an eye on where I'm going or where I'm from. I've never actually been in a place where realized, wait, now I'm completely lost and I have no idea where I am. So, never.
What about you, Hannah?
Oh, I definitely have. There was one very traumatic experience when I was about 5, and I got lost in a shopping center, and I could not find my parents, who were about 5 feet away, but I obviously couldn't see that. So I remember having a very stressful hour of trying to find my way out of this. I think it was a closed section of just a mall, and I got absolutely terribly lost. But I mean, apart from that, nowadays, thankfully to Google Maps, not so much anymore, which is a relief. One time in the South American rainforest, that was also not so nice, because we didn't have signal. But apart from that, I'm usually fine. Just putting that out there as a disclaimer.
The South American rainforest is a very juicy cliffhanger to drop like that.
Yeah, it's also quite a transition from being lost in a mall to being lost in a rainforest. It's slightly different.
Well, fair enough. The mall was quite close to the rainforest, so it all.
It was in the rain. The mall was in the rainforest.
Uh,
Depends on how you look at it.
to be honest, I have also gotten lost in a mall when I was 5. When we first moved to Canada, we went to some kind of Walmart, and Walmarts are quite huge by Dutch standards of
Yes.
stores. And I looked at a bike for too long. I turned around and my parents were gone. And here was clueless little Simon, who could barely speak English, looking for his parents in a Canadian Walmart. And some employee found me. I could not communicate with them, and they rang my description over the intercom. And my parents were in the next aisle.
To be fair, I can really see how you get lost in Walmarts and that kind of stuff. Those things are so fucking big. I feel like you could walk around there for days.
Yeah. And it's just you walk in the wrong aisle. And the good thing about Dutch superstores or like European ones, they keep the racks low so you can look over them. So
Some people can.
Also, I've worked in more of a superstore, like warehouse kind of place, and they did not keep the racks low. Supermarkets do, but they're tiny. Like in comparison, yes, they're
True.
tiny, but even our superstores like have big racks. It just makes sense. You want to stack a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I need to have some use in this world to show off my height. Reach the top shelf. Uh,
To be fair, I like using my greater height for the good of everyone. Because whenever I see an old person or a small person not being able to reach the top shelf, then I always immediately step in to help them. That's my
or you make
service.
them sad of the days they were that tall, just
Well,
showing
old
off.
people,
Yeah.
fair enough.
But to get on topic, the reason I ask how lost can you get is because today we're looking at somebody who got quite lost on their way home. We're going to be looking at Amelia Earhart today. What do you guys know about Amelia Earhart to start us off a little?
Hmm. Sh- she's a woman, and she's an aviator.
Because I was curious, because I know last time we did DB Cooper and Han being a European knew nothing about him. So I was wondering if that's the same thing about Amelia Earhart, but I suppose her legend has flown a bit more than
I
previously.
feel like Amelia Earhart's slightly more present in the general culture than DB Cooper, was just kind of a myth. I don't know. I feel like that's a very
Hmm.
North American thing. Amelia Earhart is just a historical person.
I agree. Yeah, no, it's definitely that. I mean, she has such an important role in like feminism itself, and as an icon and as a historical figure, but also as like this figure of being the first female pilot. That's just, of course, it will have a bigger impact. And I mean, even at her during her time, I think she was known in Europe as well, so it makes sense that
Yeah.
that legacy kind of lives on. So in that sense, I think it's just you can see the difference between the two. It's just that already historically she was more known. So obviously in Europe you also have this kind of, I wouldn't say culture, but definitely a bit more of an understanding of who she was and what she did.
Yeah. I mean, I've somehow bothered you all week, Hannah, about her and her disappearance. But do you know anything about, I guess, her life story in a sense? Because I'm going to explain in a second, but I just want to know where we stand before we go into this.
I mean, on one hand, I know quite a bit because I'm very interested in aviation and all of that. So obviously, I know a bit how she did it, how she was the first woman to fly, how she was the first woman to set all these records. But I mean, apart from that, obviously, her death is one of the interesting, more known topics, the more interesting topics. Apart from that, I would just assume that I have a very big gap that you will fill me in on.
Let's dive in a bit at the beginning. So we're going to start a bit about the history of who Amelia Earhart was. Then we'll go into a bit about her achievements, her final journey, and then we'll look a bit at the theories. That's how we're going to structure this today. So starting at the beginning, this is Amelia Earhart, born in Kansas, but she had a bit of a tumultuous childhood as well. Her father was a little bit of an alcoholic, which meant the family fortunes dipped, ebbed and flowed a few times. So she moved around a lot, pretty independent by that sense, but she wasn't extremely extroverted. This is one of her yearbook photos. Can you guess what the description on her yearbook photo said?
Papa No Way.
Pretty far from it.
It's probably gonna be something cooler than that.
Probably, I don't know, something like staying on the ground and not moving.
It said literally, "The girl in brown who walked alone."
How poetic.
How dramatic.
It's very sad. I don't think she wrote it. I think somebody just wrote it for her. It kind of speaks a bit. She was a bit of a more introverted loner, I guess, kind of person in high school. But then she actually was, I guess, affluent enough. I think her grandmother died and left her a sizable, I think 9 million or something in today's money, which she used to get herself into a nice little school. She took some classes, and then eventually she even was going to prepare to go to college. But then she decided, life has different, ways for me to go, and kind of dropped out. Uh, Ended up going to, guess where, huh? Hon? Canada.
Oh, I
Come
was.
on.
Why would she?
These
Why?
all have a Canadian
Why would she
connection.
go there?
Her sister was working in Toronto, so she also went there and volunteered to be a nurse during the Spanish flu and also World War One of it. And while she was there, she used to walk by a Canadian airfield every day, and that's when she became enamored with planes. So,
Cool.
there's always a Canadian connection, is what I said.
There is not all. There isn't, but I'll give you the one. This one.
Yeah, I was
She
surprised too. I didn't
she would have
notice.
loved the Avro Arrow.
I think she had an Avro plane of her own later in her life. So yeah, but no. Regardless, afterwards she moved to California. I think her father bought her her first like plane ride, and she was enamored ever since. She ended up saving money together, paying for her pilot's lessons, and eventually in 1923 she got her pilot's license, and I think she was the 16th woman in America to get her pilot's license. So not specifically the first aviatrix. And speaking about forebears of aviation, this man, as we all know, is Mr. Lindbergh. But yeah, he became the first person to cross the Atlantic on his own in his Spirit of St. Louis, flew across. But as you may not know, he wrote a book about his journeys called We, but it became an international bestseller. I think it was almost the best selling nonfiction book at that time ever. And one man capitalized on it, Mr. Putnam over there of Putnam Publishers. And he was like, yo, if this book sells so well, why not do a female version where we have a woman fly across the Atlantic? Sounds like good marketing, right?
The American way.
Fair enough. Commercialize the shit out of
Yeah.
it.
And so they started searching for some female aviatrixes, and Amelia Earhart popped up on the radar, and they were like, yo, let's roll with her. So I think the next year then, Amelia Earhart, she stepped into this plane. I believe it was called the Friendship, another corny name.
That's a good name for a ship.
Is
It
it?
is. I love it. It's so corny.
I don't
It's so cheesy, but it's so good.
I don't think it's that great.
It's great.
What would you name your ship, Hannah?
Not friendship, that's for sure.
I'd call it
Depends
friendship.
for the
Maybe.
honestly depends for the use, right? If you're crossing the Atlantic and you're creating friendship between whatever two countries, I mean, fine. But your own ship, nah.
I feel. I mean, it's just to sell books. Come on, just remember that it's to sell books. That's
It's
all she
just
was doing.
cute. You guys don't have a sense of romance. I can see it. Friendship, guys. It's cute. Come on.
Nah, I am on Hannah's side here. I feel it was a terrible
I
name.
I,
But,
I figure you would be.
but imagine Spirit of St. Louis, such a better name.
What does it even mean?
No, that's also horrible. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's also bad.
But that speaks to grand ambitions. And St. Louis is on like the wrong side of the continent too, right?
Should
So
have called it something cool, something way cooler, like this, the Queen Anne's Revenge or something.
that is a
That is a
great name
great
for a
name
boat.
for a
Definitely.
ship.
Uh, but regardless, the thing about this is she actually didn't fly this in 1928. She was just sat in the back. She did nothing. They didn't let her do anything. So she was just sat there. In her own words, Stultz did all the flying. So that was the main pilot. I was sat there like baggage, like a sack of potatoes, she called it. But regardless, it was such a huge deal for her to be flown across the ocean that, it was hugely celebrated as a huge accomplishment for just women in aviation at the time.
Oh my god.
So
That's had some ways. I guess they had some ways to go then.
I'm not surprised. I'm just not surprised. It's a sad little story and a little anecdote, but I'm not surprised in the least. This
I
is
mean,
what
there
it's
is some
always.
rationale.
Hmm?
There is technically some rationale behind this because she wasn't trained to do that type of flying in that type of
So
plane.
then why was she there?
Because they needed to write a book about her crossing the ocean.
But she wasn't. Look, a woman crossed the ocean. How's that cool?
No, but the last one sold like 6.5 million copies. That
Yeah,
was
but
huge
she
back
didn't
then.
even fly it. She was just a passenger.
I mean, nobody knows that.
Everyone could have done that. Why did she? Why did they need her specifically? Could have just picked up a
'Cause-
random like diplomat or something, or an important lady, and then just fly her over instead of finding someone to market and then putting her in like as a pilot and then putting her in the back of the plane. It doesn't make any sense.
Mm. I mean, it still did a lot. And maybe she used her fame for good. Like, she did a lot of parades and she ended up becoming quite the national celebrity. However, as a funny tangent, the same can't be said over the pilot, the actual pilot, Stultz. If you want to describe the little newspaper clipping here, Han, what do you see?
I see a man and a woman. Oh, and it says last picture of Stultz. That doesn't that sounds ominous. Wilmer Stultz, as he appeared with Mrs. Stultz for a few minutes before he crashed to his death with two other men. I'll be home in 15 minutes. Have lunch ready, were his parting words to Mrs. Stultz as he took off. Yeah, that's.
Happened back then, I suppose. And the description of it, I read like the 1929 New York Times clipping of it. It's so dramatic. Some guys saw the plane. it like was like flying really close to a house, almost clipped our house, they were saying. Then it shot back up in the sky, and then they saw in the plane the two guys trying to wrestle Stultz away from the controls, and then it just near and then flew right into and like kind of like, killed everybody in it.
But why?
But the reason behind this is apparently he was drunk flying. Apparently his brain contained 0.42% alcohol, which is quite a lot.
You just imagine the rationale or the thinking of the two men in the plane, because you're halfway through the flight, right? And then you realize, wait, why are you Stultz? Wilmer? Why are you swaying so much? Oh my God, are you drunk? Get away from the controls!
No, but I think it's even worse than that, because he told his wife he's back in 15 minutes. So I think he was like, yo, I'm drinking a bit. Let's go take the plane up for a joyride.
Also, have lunch ready. So this was some early ass drinking. Like
that's true.
That's some proper alcoholism.
Poor man. Well, I mean,
poor woman.
Poor man.
Poor woman, more
guys.
like. I mean, she's sitting there with her lunch ready, and then she hears a massive boom in the backyard.
The other thing, I don't know what happened to her, because, I mean, I guess she wasn't that famous, but I was looking around. Apparently, she also died in 1929. And I can't find out where. So I'm thinking maybe she was in the plane, maybe not, but this clipping seems to do. But it's weird they both died in the same year.
No, like, why would you say to have lunch ready to someone who's in the plane you're in? That doesn't make any sense.
Just making sandwiches in the back or something.
No, that makes they were his parting words as he took off. Wait, as he took off? Oh, so basically he was gonna do. He just hopped in the plane at home or something. I was like, I'll be right back, honey, and then.
Exactly, yeah. Right. It was quite insane. But I guess moving on, Amelia Earhart did become famous, became a real champion of women's rights and just getting women into like higher careers, higher education, etc. And she gave a lot of talks and lectures around the country. And she publicized motorized scooters and stuff like that. Like all these little products that were technological, they all wanted her as their spokesperson. And it's like
motorized scooters though, that's pretty rad, I'll say. 15 mile an hour. That's a pretty fucking rapid scooter. Holy shit.
Different regulations back then.
Oh, let's just sail down the street with our 15 mile an hour steps and scooters. See how that happens.
She also got married to George Putnam, the publisher of the original book. However, she had a very liberal sense on marriage. But she was basically like, I'm not going to let myself be bound by any medieval code of faithfulness. I may have to keep to some place where I can go to be myself now and then, for I cannot guarantee to endure at all times the confinement of even an attractive cage.
Interesting.
Yeah, very, very progressive ideas on this kind of stuff. Apparently, he asked her to marry him 6 times before she accepted.
I wonder what did it that 6th time. Like, oh God, will you finally quit?
He probably accepted when she said, I'm not, wanting to be caged, and he was like, sure. Whatever.
True.
Oh God, this reminds me of too many relationships that I've seen. Sure, honey, we can have an open relationship. It's fine. Just marry me, please. Put on the ring, thank you.
But I mean, George Putnam was a very important person in this partnership, because he was very much behind the scenes, like responsible for all of her like publishing and getting her image out and really like marketing her, which was very important to keep like her planes going and to feed all the costs and everything like that. So it was very, I mean, I guess it's useful. And she also developed like, very close connections with other important women. Who do you think the other woman this photograph is?
I'm not good with identifying North American women from that time on photographs.
Eleanor Roosevelt?
It is Eleanor Roosevelt.
Oh.
Sorry, Eleanor Roosevelt, who she had a deep friendship with. Some historians think it went even further. I'll say less about that.
Is that a history account of history, or is that a fan fiction?
I think Hannah, I think you've heard this too, but I think it's a legitimate account of history.
I mean, could be both at this point. It's never been really proven, so I wouldn't say it's a historical fact. It's more like a historical hypothesis, from what I've gathered.
Yeah.
So it's fan fiction.
Yeah.
Apparently, they snuck out together after one really boring White House dinner to fly from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, unannounced, just randomly, alone, to get her in that plane.
To be fair, that just sounds like if that was 2 men, we wouldn't be having this conversation. That was my utter thought. That would just be cool. Like, yeah, if I had a friend that had an airplane, I was stuck at some boring dinner, and she'd like give me a little whisper and be like, "Hey, you want to go fly in an airplane? Yeah, fuck yeah, let's go."
Yeah. The funny thing though is that Eleanor's airplane was technically meant for the president, so it was called the Guess Where the Second. I don't know, a stupid name again, but apparently the Secret Service thought it was too dangerous for Roosevelt, the president, to fly in, but they let her fly in anyways because less important.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, first lady. Eh.
But I'll do a quick, but I'll do a rapid fire of some of her rapid shot of some of her achievements. In 1928, shortly after she came back from crossing the ocean in the back seat, basically, she was like, "I'm gonna do something on my own," and she became the first woman to fly solo across the entirety of the North American continent and back. On April 8th, 1931, she set a world altitude record in a little it got auto gyros, like a little plane with a little propeller on top. It's not a helicopter; it's different.
Is it one of those Leonardo da Vinci things, or it's just a bucket with a rotor thing on top?
A bit more sophisticated
Not
than that.
quite, not quite.
Not quite.
But they're pretty cool because you don't have like you flying it, but you're not. There's no roof thing, like there's no cover basically.
So
And
it's basically like a hot air balloon, but with a propeller instead of a balloon.
it's like a helicopter that is not quite as quick and not quite doesn't go quite as high, and you don't have a cover. But apart from that, it's fine.
Oh wait! Oh, I know what that is. That is one of those James Bond things. James
I
Bond had
suppose.
one of those.
Well, she was the first woman to fly in one of them, and she was also like sponsored by the company to market it a bit. So it's kind of cool. But she set an altitude record in it, I think, for like all genders. So that's sweet as well. In 1932, the next year, on the fifth anniversary of Lindbergh's flight across the ocean, she became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. So she actually did it on her own the second time back. So she actually did cross the Atlantic on her own. So good for her. The funny thing is, she was supposed to touch down in Paris. Guess where she did touch down?
Amsterdam,
Uh,
Brussels.
any guesses, Hannah?
Somewhere in Germany.
Nope, Scotland.
What?
Yes, she missed her mark a little.
I feel like this is. I feel like we should bring this up a little bit later in the podcast for reasons that'll become apparent.
Yeah,
She kind of missed her mark by what is it? A country.
A few
I guess.
countries.
Oh no, one country basically.
Apparently, she blamed it, or the story was there were strong icy winds and mechanical problems, but who knows? I'm not saying anything. 1935, she became the first person to fly from Hawaii to California, which was apparently extremely impressive. And then in 1935, again, later on, she also became the first to do a solo flight from Mexico City to New York City. And then in the meantime, she also set a bunch of like women's speed records and distance records and aviation stuff. So she was, upping her resume, preparing for something. But as she was growing older, so by 1936, she was 39 years old. She was getting the end of her life a bit as a pilot because, once you're in your 40s, you're pretty much, kicking the bucket, right?
Is that
But
true? As a pilot,
I think as a pilot, especially at that time, you should be fine for like a while.
I mean,
There was nobody checking.
in the 50s, people were
That's
in the 50s,
true.
people were driving Formula One cars at age 50, 56. So I think she should have been fine.
Maybe. But anyway, she wanted to, go out with a bang. So she wanted to do a big thing while she still could that, like, set an actual record, like, break one that even men hadn't broken yet. So her plan was to fly all across the world, do an entire circumnavigation across the equator. And she'd be the first person to do so. So it was actually like a huge undertaking, a 47,000-kilometer journey. So yeah, she planned out the route a bit. So starting in California, she'd fly across America, then touch down in South America, go off from Brazil, go through Africa, across this Middle East, through India, and then around Indonesia, New Guinea, and then fly back via Hawaii to America. So quite the undertaking. But to do so, she needed some preparations. So it's quite an impressive journey, though, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, how did she do this with the fuel as well? Those were huge distances.
Yeah. So I mean, getting onto like the topic of preparations, the way she did it is she had a bunch of refueling stops along. So she didn't do this straight in one blast. She had little stops all along. So like when she hit Africa, she'd stop in like the big cities there, and then in India, same thing, and then the other countries, same thing. So she'd fly for like a day or two, stop down, get fuel, tank up, take off again. And it was I think her husband Putnam, he managed a lot of like the logistics behind that, setting up where she was landing, getting some press pictures, some optics, and really mapping it out. So the thing is, the Pacific Ocean, as if you didn't know, is huge. There's not a good way to fly across it, especially with the fuel limitations they had back in the day. So what she needed was a little refueling stop halfway. There was Hawaii, but that was too far to make in her plane trip. So she ended up saying, "Yo, these little islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean called atolls. They're really tiny, so like a few kilometers long, basically little dots." She's like, "Wouldn't it be neat if we put an airstrip there and we could land there and then take back off the next day, refuel?" So that's what they wanted to do, except it was quite none of them had an airstrip at the time. So she went to President Roosevelt, and was like, "Yo, wouldn't you like to build an airstrip in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with no strategic purpose where I can land my plane?" And he was like, "Nah, I don't think I want to invest all the money in that." But eventually, after some pestering, he actually did it. On one of the little islands there, he built her an airstrip with a little house for her and then enough to refuel for her to land on one day and then take back off.
That's pretty cool. Gotta have that powerful connection.
I suppose so.
Ask your
Right?
ask your friend's husband if he can build you an airstrip in the Pacific.
For no other reason than just leisure
Yeah,
in the end, right?
Well, I mean, I guess it's also a national pride thing, of course, because if Amelia Earhart does this, then everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, America's so good."
hmm But to fly this plane, you need a few other things as well. First, you need a plane. So the plane she got, a majestic little thing there, a Lockheed Electra 10E, so like a special edition one. It's typically like a small to medium range passenger jet, so it could fit 12 people. But she took out all 12 of those seats and threw in fuel tanks and some other modifications. She also eliminated the passenger windows, and she really upgraded it with a like new autopilot, radio, navigation, etc. However, she made a few cuts too. She took out the Morse code keys because she figured they weighed too much. She also took out the life rafts because, again, got to cut down on some weight.
Never plan for failure.
So,
Makes sense.
So basically, she just cut out all her security that she could have had.
That is.
That
But she did. But she did take a toy boy.
boy toy.
A boy
that's what
toy.
I was trying to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
well, you gotta have that co-pilot.
Oh, right.
Well, he wasn't even a co-pilot. So you're referring to her navigator in the plane.
Her boy toy.
So she wanted a navigator along to make sure she's flying in the right direction because as back then, Google Maps didn't exist. No navigation really existed, just some crude radio stuff. So you need somebody who can actually figure out if you're in the middle of nowhere, where am I and where am I going?
Didn't she? No, sorry, but didn't she fly alone across the Atlantic though?
Yeah, and that was such a experience that she didn't want to do that again.
Okay, fair
So
enough. Makes sense.
I believe that was what she said. But yeah, I think she did go alone across the Atlantic, but she literally flew with like holding a map, like pressed against the screen the entire time for like
You know,
10
It
hours.
wouldn't be the first time that I cycle somewhere and I'm holding my phone in one hand with Google Maps, so I can kind of relate. It's not great.
Yeah, except you don't land in a different country, right?
Yeah, and if you mess up, you mess up slightly bigger than falling off a bike.
Yeah. So she needed a skilled navigator who was skilled in celestial navigation. So basically looking at the stars and being like, yeah, this is how we need to go. She got Harry Manning. He was a skilled navigator. He was also a really skilled pilot and also knew Morse code and communications pretty well. And he self-described him as navigation in bad weather is my specialty. So, seems like a good guy to have on your team, right?
Gotta sell your CV.
Yeah. But it looks like a successful trip, right? Are we optimistic about their odds here?
Well, if you remember that they took out the life rafts and their Morse code and everything else, how is this going to weigh up? Is this guy really going to save the whole operation just with his skills? If she's just chucking out everything of her plane that could, in a case of emergency, be relevant? I don't know.
hmm There were question marks, and other people were a bit skeptical of even her ability to use her new radios in the plane because the new ones she had in were like really fancy voice to like other people ones. But the issue is nobody ever really saw her using them properly. So there's a chance she didn't even know how to use them perfectly before even taking off.
I'm pretty sure she didn't care. That's part of her charm. Like, look at that smile on that picture. That's a woman that doesn't give a crap.
Exactly. First journey, they take up March 17, 1937, and they go west to east. So they fly towards Hawaii. They land in Hawaii. The next day, they try to take off again, and she kind of crashes the plane on takeoff. So if you see the picture or something, there's a huge mangled plane. The engine's all pushed up. Seems like a good sight, right?
Yeah, no, that doesn't
Yeah.
look good.
So basically, most people don't know, but the first time they try doing this, they failed because they end up in Hawaii with the broken plane. Basically, in here, the navigator, the really good one, Harry Manning, was like, "Yeah, screw it, I'm out. I don't want to fly with you anymore. I don't think you're a good pilot," is what accounts say. What Amelia and her husband say is they thought he was a bad navigator and wanted somebody better. But regardless, he split from the group. And instead, Fred Noonan came in for the second voyage, which they wanted to do because they did want to get this right. Fred Noonan was still a good navigator, but he was known for being a bit drunk sometimes, or he liked to drink too much, and allegedly that's what got him fired from his previous job. But they were off again. So this time they went east-west. So they started in California, flew all the way to New York and Florida, and then they actually went around the world pretty successfully. So they got all the way down to New Guinea, and we're going to do they had two more stops left. Howland Island in the middle of nowhere where Roosevelt had built the airstrip, then Honolulu, and then California, and then they were done. So they came pretty close to the end. On July 1st, 1937, she was in New Guinea, and she took off, and she had radio communications with a ship stationed by the Howland Island to serve as a waypoint. They got a few, communications from her at like 2:45 a.m. They were like, "Yeah, I'm on my way. It's a bit cloudy, but it's good." 5 a.m. again, weather's not looking the greatest, but I'm still on my way. Around 7 a.m., they got a frantic message of her being like, "Yo, my fuel is running out and I don't see you guys. Where the hell are you?" 7:45, she is like, "My fuel is definitely going out. I should be above you according to my coordinates. I see nothing. I see no island. I see no ship. I don't see you at all." 8:43 a.m., she gave her last message, which says, "We are on line 157337. We'll repeat this message. We'll repeat this on 6210 kilocycles. Wait." And that was the last message that anybody ever heard from her again. And her plane disappeared into nowhere. Following that, they immediately launched a search. The U.S. Navy and Coast Guard launched a $4 million search, which was the most expensive and largest search they'd ever done to that point in time. But nothing has ever been found from her plane since then. Any hypotheses on how we got here?
Well, I mean, fuel issues do sound like it could be. The thing is, if the island was that tiny, and you can glide with a plane up to a
Yeah.
certain amount of time, and but in the end, if there's no island, then you're not going to land anywhere important and just crash. So it does make sense. On the other hand, if they haven't found anything and they knew her coordinates, that's also strange.
Well, they didn't really know her coordinates, did she? Did they? Because she didn't know her coordinates. So
One of the issues was that when taking off, some people hypothesized that she was so heavy laden with fuel because this was, I think, the longest stretch she was flying, and she actually broke off the communication antenna on her plane while taking off. So only, I guess, her weaker communication worked. So she could send out messages, she could send out stuff, but she was having difficulties receiving stuff back to her. And she could also not get a lock onto where the ship was, and the ship couldn't lock onto her either. So she was essentially flying blind, relying only on Fred Noonan and his perhaps drunken eye to guide them.
yeah,
And the Pacific Ocean is a huge, huge place.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, if you crash and there's currents and there's winds and everything, you're not necessarily going to be found immediately. So, especially if they didn't have the coordinates, then it makes it a lot more difficult.
it makes it pretty much impossible if you're in deep sea because you just sink, and then, well,
Yep.
the sea's pretty deep in the Atlantic, in the Pacific at some point. So
Yeah.
there are parts of the sea that, like, we wouldn't even be able to get to at this point, or at least with great difficulty. So
Yeah. No, it's kind of sad though, because the first theory is basically that she was flying, she ran out of fuel somehow, she landed in the ocean, and that was it. It's a pretty simple explanation, but it's still the official cause of how she died officially. That she just crashed in the ocean, she ran out of fuel. There are some issues with this one, a little bit. Technically, she did have extra fuel on hand, so an extra few hours because maybe I hadn't to the wrong. Maybe something happens. And some hypothesize she used more fuel than she needed to because she had some issues and had to climb to a higher altitude because there were stronger winds or a stormish thing, and she wanted to avoid it. So she could have burned a lot of fuel in the beginning, but it seems unlikely she would have burned so much that she would not have gotten to Howland Island. So
well, I mean, if your navigation is off, it doesn't really matter how much fuel you have because you're at that point you're gone. Like you don't know where you are, and yeah, at that point, even if you have a lot of fuel, you'd have to fly all the way back to the west in order to make landfall again, because there's no way of knowing which way other way to go. Like he could have been completely off course.
Yeah, and there's a theory that she did get knocked off because right out of New Guinea when they took off, there was a ship supposed to be there, which they were going to use as a landmark to for Fred to plot his route out. The ship that was there said they didn't see the plane, but a second ship said they did see the plane, but the ship was a bit off target. So what some people think is that Noonan saw the wrong ship and plotted the wrong way, and they went out the wrong way instead. I guess on a plausibility score, what do you guys think about the theory that she just crashed in the ocean and I suppose drowned, eaten by the fish?
Pretty high, I'd say. I mean, it's the only one I know until now, so.
So,
But it does make sense. I mean, from what I know, if you have, I mean, especially if she was full with fuel, that's quite heavy as well. So you need more fuel, to get somewhere. And if he was off course, which sounds pretty likely,
mhm.
then there's no way she could have made it to the correct island where there was a landing strip.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the less cool option for sure. It's the less interesting option, but navigation is crazy difficult. It's insanely difficult. There's so much math that goes into it, and astronomy as well. It's that like even the slightest incline, like even a little bit, being even a little bit off for a slightly longer distance means that you're going to be completely off. So yeah, I think it's pretty likely they just kind of messed up something or forgot to calculate something in like extra weight, less fuel, wind, that kind of stuff, and that just kind of ever so slightly veered them off course. And then, well, you're looking for a needle in a haystack with like a tiny little island.
yeah. Her last telegram to Putnam, her husband, was her saying that everything's fine in New Guinea, except she had some personnel problems. So some people hypothesized that took to Fred Noonan getting wasted somewhere. So that could not be a good sign for his navigational skills.
Maybe he's better when he's drunk. Who knows?
That's what they all say.
Extremely high function alcoholic. Like maybe she like banned him from drinking and that's why he messed up, because he was so like in alcohol withdrawal
Yeah,
stricken.
could be.
That's my theory.
I mean, are you better? Are you a better drunk flyer, Hannah? Is that something you believe in?
Absolutely not. No. It's like I feel like drunk flying and drunk driving is like on par with each other. We've seen beforehand, with the guy who Stoltz was his name, I think, who crashed and burned. And if he was drunk, then I think this is going to be the same thing in this case. They're not gonna make it very far. But then again, withdrawal from alcohol is also not to be messed with. So who knows?
I'll say I think I'm as good a flyer when I'm drunk as I am when I'm sober.
Wow, Han, I knew I could rely on you.
only because I do not know how to fly a plane, so it wouldn't really matter if I was drunk.
Sorry. The second theory is, maybe they ran across a second island while flying their plane and managed to still land it somehow. So, about 650 kilometers from Howland Island, there's a place called Gardner Island, which is also sometimes called Nikomaru Island, a bit more exotic of a name. Some people think that if Noonan got off course, he could have flown right across that island and then maybe ran out of fuel as they were coming near it, and then she could have landed somewhere near that island. Because if you look at the island, you can see there's a big coral reef surrounding all of it, and potentially you could have landed a plane on there. There are some evidences pointing that she might have gone this far, despite it being so far off course. These are tenuous links, but they are links nonetheless. The first are transmissions. So after her disappearance, people all over the world began reporting that they were hearing some transmissions from a certain Amelia Earhart calling for distress. There was one from Rock Springs, Wyoming. Some 16-year-old girl. She was she heard Amelia Earhart, and she's saying she was stranded on a reef south of the equator.
I mean, there's no detail south of the equator. Anyone can say
Yeah.
that.
But imagine you are Amelia Earhart.
How would you know that she's
I
south
mean,
of the equator? Was she flushing the toilet? And kind of told. Could you tell by that?
Sorry.
Well, isn't it so that the water kind of drains the different way around if you're on the southern?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, exactly. That's how she knew. That's my theory. She made a
Sure,
makeshift toilet
but-
and then drained it, and then she knew.
Amelia Earhart would know. I mean, she's not going to fly north of the equator from her flight route.
But
Well,
what if she missed her flight route? Didn't we
exactly.
say that she had a drunk
Yeah.
guy with her?
She didn't know where she
Maybe.
was, so like the fact that this was her only information tells me that she made a toilet.
Mm,
That's all I can say.
whatever. There's another woman, another credible-ish account from New Brunswick, Canada. I'm including this for Canadian sake again. But some woman said she heard Amelia Earhart say she was with her navigator who was badly injured. That was all from that account.
How? I mean, I don't know that much about radio, but I feel like this is very far off.
Yes, and some people say that too. But the thing is, there is an explanation, and this could technically have worked because her radio was using a special kind of a different frequency, which people theorize can bounce off the. I didn't write it down, but yeah, some higher part in the atmosphere, it can bounce off and then transmit to another part in the globe. So people have tested out if she was on the island, she could have shot radio waves, which could have gone to somebody as far as New Brunswick potentially. So it is feasible, technically. And the most reputable account came in St. Petersburg, Florida, where a certain Betty Clark, another teen, heard her hero, Amelia Earhart, as she was browsing on the radio channels. But for 2 hours, she heard Amelia Earhart broadcast about her being knee deep in high water. And she heard a second man's voice, very much, under stress in the background. And she also heard Amelia Earhart several times say that she was by New York City, which sounds suspicious. Except the only other notable thing about Gardner Island is it has a wreck on it, a wreck from a ship called the Norwich City. So some people said that the girl might have misheard her saying Norwich City instead, and that seems like a pretty big coincidence if it didn't actually happen.
And I mean, Florida sounds more doable than New Brunswick. No offense to all the Canadians in the room, but
You're the first person on this show who's ever taken Florida more credibly over New Brunswick, so
I don't even know
congratulations.
where New Brunswick is, so
It's like by Quebec.
what's a Quebec?
Great. Regardless, moving on. It doesn't. The one other cool thing is that there's this association of, I assume, mainly old retired pilots who have nothing better to do, as is often in these cases, called Tigar, who like to send expeditions to this island and seek to find things which could have been Amelia Earhart's. They've gone like 9 different times in the past 30 years, and they have found some things. A few years ago, they found a shoe from the 1930s, which they said was a woman's shoe, except it was 2 sizes bigger than Amelia Earhart's.
Maybe you should like roomy shoes. Who knows?
Yeah. Or some people say if you're flying high, your feet swell up or something weird like that. So you need roomier shoes to fly properly.
maybe at the time. Who knows?
You seem very skeptical there,
What
Hannah.
what
But
people say then? what kind of people say this?
I read a comment on the internet that
Yeah.
said that.
Okay. Yeah. That's
Sounds
what
like
I
it, yeah.
thought. Well, the internet told me. The internet would never lie to me.
No, but regardless, they also found a piece of metal on the island, which they said could have been from the plane. Most strongly, I think, they found remnants of a bottle which they positively identified as a bottle from 1935 or 36, which was an freckle cream bottle, which Amelia Earhart had known to like the brand.
That's weird. I guess no people wouldn't necessarily vacation on the island and leave anti-freckle cream, right?
Especially in the 1930s, because this island was at that point uninhabited. It did get some inhabitants in the 40s, but yeah.
No, but you got to remember that. I mean, islands like these, like there's plenty of people that kind of end up on those islands for one reason or another. Because shipwrecks do still happen.
Yeah, but this thing is tiny.
Well, yeah, that's
And
the
I mean
point.
currents.
Hmm.
If you have
Yeah,
if you have a strong enough current, I mean it could technically
yeah.
carry a wreck, carry the plane or
Anti-freckle.
carry certain parts of it. So I guess
That's true.
Yeah.
That could have been it.
The strongest piece of evidence happened in 1940, where some guy, a British colonial officer, he was on the island for some reason or another, like digging around. Gerald Gallagher, he found 13 bones. These bones were from a human skeleton, he said, of a person about 155 centimeters tall, which matched her height. And he said, "This is Amelia Earhart. I'm so excited." And he sent those bones off to a doctor in, I think, Fiji or somewhere. Dr. D.W. Hoodlers or something weird like that. And Hoodlers looked at it and was like, yeah, I don't think these are it. And he threw the bones out.
You what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, he tossed the bones.
What a guy! Like he tossed it. He didn't
Why
Yeah.
even
would you do
bury him.
that?
Yes, exactly. People still don't know why. They literally dug up his old house looking for these bones in 2017,
What a
but they found
guy!
nothing.
He's like, yeah, no, this is not it. This is not it. Here, dog. Give it to the
Yeah, and
dog.
people have reviewed his notes from the original, like brief glance he took at, and they're like, it definitely could have been some female bones there, bro. But yeah. But the other thing is, the cool thing is, they wouldn't have been alone on this island.
That doesn't sound cool. That sounds incredibly creepy when you say it like that.
Yeah, it's the worst thing you
The
want to know when you're on an uninhabited island is to hear we're not alone.
So on this island, they have these
Oh
lovely little
fucking! Oh
crabs.
god! Oh my Christ! That's terrifying. You should say. You
These
should warn
lovely
me
little
when you do
crabs.
things like that. That's like a massive. It looks like a spider. It's terrifying. Jesus Christ!
So
Oh, God. Yeah.
I think you might not be getting the perspective right, because I'll warn you this time, Han. This is what they look like in real life.
Oh my god! Why would you do this? It's
Do
terrifying.
you want to? Do you want to describe the size?
Big enough to scare the shit out of me. That's all I'm gonna say about it.
It's bigger than an average toddler, is what I'd say.
It's about it. Like, oh my god. Oh. Oh.
How? That's my only question. How did they get so big?
If you lock something up on an island, they do weird things.
Yeah, they
That's
eat
my
your
rationale.
they feed off your nightmares apparently. Jesus Christ.
But these are coconut crabs. If you want to be as repulsed as Han is, just Google that term, coconut crabs. They are actually even worse. They are slightly aggressive animals, and they like to eat things. So, if a lot of people hypothesize that if Amelia Earhart was in a weaker state on this island, these little hordes would have come to her, and as soon as she couldn't fight them off anymore, they would have taken a bite, and eventually, they would have eaten
What
her.
a horrible way to die. My god.
That's the crab joke I was telling you about.
That's not a joke, that's terrible. That's horrible. That's not a joke. That's just straight up fucked up.
What do you think of this, Hannah?
I prefer the first version, not gonna lie. But couldn't she have just died before and then they ate her? I really,
That could have also happened.
yeah, I would prefer that, honestly, for my own sake and my own, my own nightmares to keep them at bay. I would prefer that they ate her afterwards.
Yeah, because those bones were a bit damaged, so they the crab could have, done some damage to those bones. So yeah, and that is the castaway fairy, which ends up with her eaten by big crabs. Amazing, right, hon?
Yeah. Next, please.
What do we make of this, though? How likely do we think this is?
Unlikely.
Really? Why? Don't you like the crabs?
No, I don't. To be fair, I'm pretty sure the crabs aren't that aggressive and
The accounts say they are fairly aggressive.
really
They're known for being
I mean
aggressive.
I've because I've seen some document and I know a little bit about coconut crabs and they do occur in inhabitable areas, but I don't know, are they? Oh my god, it's
No.
terrifying! Just a mob of crabs running at you.
Just looking at you, waiting for you to be weak enough to not fend them off.
Yeah, I don't know.
Mm.
Didn't she carry
What do you
a
think
gun? I bet she carried a gun. I bet she had some kind of
No.
weapon.
I don't think so. I mean, she didn't carry like a life raft. I think a gun is after that in the list of priorities.
No, I don't think so. I mean, like a life raft is for when you crash the airplane. I feel like she was super confident about that, but
Still,
sometimes you have to touch down in areas that might be a bit
Yeah.
less comfortable, and then you want a gun.
but imagine 20 of these running at you.
Well,
And these shells, I don't think you could shoot them like that.
I'm pretty sure that if you shot like one or two, or like one shot would just scare the shit out of them, scare them off.
No, these are crabs, yo.
What is
PC
that
crabs.
supposed to mean? These are crabs, yo. When they hear a shot, they just go into a frenzy.
No, I imagine they're like really inquisitive cats where they scare off for a few minutes and they slowly crawl back up.
But look at this guy. Look at the guy in the picture. So there's a guy in a picture surrounded by 3 crabs. He isn't being eaten. They're not eating him.
What do you think they're trying to do? They're getting close to him.
Well, he doesn't
Maybe
look...
maybe they're domesticated already.
Yeah,
I don't know. It looks more surprised
this
than
one,
anything
this one
else.
is stealing from the other picture is one opening a garbage can and stealing food from it, like a raccoon.
Yeah, but that I mean raccoons are pretty aggressive too, so that makes sense.
If a raccoon could attack a human and eat it, they would, and
That
therefore
is
it's
not
probably
comforting.
No, to be fair,
sorry.
if raccoons had guns, they'd shoot us all. I'm pretty sure
Oh
about
yeah,
that.
they already have the little bandit eyes on them, right? So,
That they do.
however, this is not the only good theory that there is. The second really cool theory is that she was actually up to something else in those islands. So remember how she got the airstrip built for on Howland Island, right? And President Roosevelt took a while to be convinced to let her do that. Maybe there was something else that she exchanged in order to get the airstrip built. Given it was 1937, Han, do you know anything about the geopolitical tensions in that region?
Yeah, they kind of had a bit of a thing with Japan, right? Didn't they?
Yeah. And doesn't it seem somewhat likely, Hannah, that if the Americans had a plane flying over the area, they would, throw a camera in there, take some snapshots of the Japanese, islands, do a little flyover. It'd be a nice trade-off for having one landing strip being built, right?
Oh, they would be delighted.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what you see in all the movies, right? All the things that have been done under the guise of civilian missions that were in the end military. And if President Roosevelt himself built it,
He did.
I
Well,
mean,
not personally, but
He went there and
imagine him with a shovel and a
he's
let's
like, God
just
damn it, Eleanor, what you make me do.
look at him wheelchairing over there and digging the holes for the landing strip. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
Nah, but some even go further and say that her disappearance was all a ruse to get that $4 million search party out there, which included an aircraft carrier and a destroyer to search all the islands to see what the Japanese are up to.
I mean, it's a little weird that they're sending like those heavy military ships out there in a sense to just search for one famous figure that they could also search with different equipment, I suppose. Why
Yeah,
send out the military?
I feel like Roosevelt was like, okay, Eleanor, I know your friend is bothering me. I'm just gonna tell her no, and then eventually some like CIA or like what did it call before the ODD or something like that got wind of the plan. It was like, yo, it would be nice if we threw a camera on there and the many special modifications that plane had and just took some pictures and that would be worth it for us.
I do have one question. So we saw the picture of her intended flight, and that was nowhere near Japan. Like Howland Island
Mhm.
is nowhere near Japan.
Yeah. So the other theory is that she disappeared on purpose and then they started a big manhunt to get their people in place because they covered it was the largest search they ever did and a lot of these islands were somewhat strategically important in some sense, right?
They would be eventually. The Second World War like was basically an island hopping war in the
Hmm.
Pacific.
And I mean, before they did all the testing on the islands and everything. So, I mean, if you look at what the French did with their bombs and stuff, where they destroyed the Bikini Atoll, you can't tell me that the Americans didn't do the same thing. So, it would make sense to at least stake out the area and see what you can use in that area and just if the Japanese don't have a claim to it, then just position your people there and your stuff.
Yeah. And the Japanese were very aggressive about not allowing any people around there. And this is a very well timed ruse for them to be in the area.
Smart.
So
So where'd she go?
could be the case. Yeah. So there are different conflicting theories depending on who you believe. And there's a lot of secondhand accounts of like, oh, my grandfather was Japanese and he definitely heard this. Or like I was on vacation in like Saipan and the locals definitely told me this. But there's a few theories. So first off, some people think she was captured accidentally by the Japanese. So they think maybe she was so disoriented and ended up in Saipan, which is completely the wrong direction, and that was Japanese controlled territory and she just got taken there. Some others think that she crashed on Gardner Island, as we were talking about earlier, and the Japanese found her first and just took her in the plane with them, which could seem somewhat likely. Others think that the Japanese noticed her doing some really peculiar flying maneuvers, taking some pictures, or intercepted her transmissions of a more clandestine nature, and they shot her down and then stole her like that. Either case, if she was captured by the Japanese, others claim she was taken to Tokyo and she became one of the Tokyo Roses. They were women or female broadcasters of Japanese propaganda in English in Japan during the time.
Mm.
But was it ever? I mean, she probably was known, right? There must have been recordings of her voice that they could compare. So was it ever really proven that it was her, like her
It was never
voice? And
proven. So Putnam, he got, he was asked to clarify on several recordings they had. He said no. But then again, officially in public, he said no. So, because it would have been a very high profile blunder if the Japanese ever went public with this. The theory is either she got executed before the war ended, or that the Americans liberated her when they captured Tokyo and they took her back to America, and she was so, shocked that she lived a normal lifestyle afterwards. There is one piece of evidence for this. This photo. There is a distinctive looking woman on a pier in a dock with some ships around her. One of those ships in the back right hand corner is a seems to also carry a certain flying vehicle on it. So people theorize that this is a picture of her in Saipan after being captured by the Japanese. Somebody snapped a picture of her. If you want to see a bit more identification, and this is what people think who is who, with Earhart sitting on a dock looking backwards and Noonan kind of hiding behind the sign.
my only problem with this is that, I mean, they're showing only her from her back,
Yeah.
and you can't really see Noonan at all. So I no offense, right? I mean, if people think this is credible, sure. I don't really see it, but maybe I just don't have the eye to identify Earhart on pictures either.
This does reek of like the cryptozoologist problem. It's like, oh, we took a picture of something, oh, but it's really blurry and vague. But trust me, this is what I'm telling you it is. Like, no,
Yeah.
I don't know, I mean, she does look distinctive because she looks a lot more white than the rest of the people there, which is like makes it slightly more credible. And the hairdo isn't really. I don't know. I know nothing about 1930s hair fashion in Japan. But it does look like she has short hair, which I don't know. That might be indicative of something.
But most people say that it was apparently published in a book published in 1935, which predates her flight by a bit. So maybe a bit less credible. But I don't know. Some people went very insane on the theory. This guy, his name is Joseph Gervais. He was a former or retired Air Force major. I want to read a quote of his haunting. Let me have that soundbite about it. As you saying this.
Wait, I should I? Do I have to say
Yes, you
this?
should.
Why do you want me to say that? I've been studying Amelia Earhart for 17 years. I have over 1,000 photographs of her from the time she was a baby. I know more about her than I know about my mother. Yeah, that's creepy. Definitely creepy. He's got a massive picture of Amelia Earhart in the back as well. I swear
One
to
of his thousand.
this is. Hmm.
It's taking it a bit too far. I mean, he's really
It goes further. It goes further. So he's a huge proponent of the her being taken captive by the Japanese theory, and then the Americans liberated her in Tokyo. And then she was reintroduced back into the American population. Do you know why he's such a big proponent of this?
Because he wants to marry her.
No, because apparently he met her.
Oh yeah.
So one day he was attending some random ceremony and he saw this woman called Irene Balaam from New Jersey. And he looked at her and he looked at her again and he was like, wait, you are Amelia Earhart. And she was like, I am not Amelia Earhart. She was quite offended. But he was like, no, 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 you are Amelia Earhart. You must tell me, please tell me you're Amelia Earhart. He wrote a book about her being Amelia Earhart, which got national media attention. She heavily denied this. She filed a $1.5 million lawsuit against him and also a lengthy affidavit refuting all of these claims, which is exactly what a guilty person would do.
Or someone who just wanted to get this dickhole off her back, like this borderline stalker off her back. I mean, I can kind of see why you would do that. Like the argument, that's what a guilty person would do, is generally a bad argument.
and also, I mean, there's so many lookalikes of people, right, that don't necessarily have to do anything with each other, and to just go up to a random person in the street and be like, "You must be this person." It feels intrusive.
Oh yeah.
Imagine imagine somebody coming up to you on the street randomly and being like, you're Paul McCartney. He died a while back. You're Paul McCartney. And then he writes a book about you and tries to make you national headline media attention of you being Paul McCartney.
I'd
How
run.
would you feel?
I'd run with it. Be like, yeah,
Okay,
I
so
am Paul
okay,
McCartney.
great. Well,
I
I
would
should have
like
chosen
my.
a less
I'll have my.
glamorous example.
I'll have my Beatles royalties now. Thank you. Please wire them all to this account. Thank you very much.
She could have ran a fit. Like, imagine she was like, I actually am. But no, she was apparently some stern banker lady. So,
No
I see
sense
why
of
she would.
humor.
Yeah.
but
Why are you comparing me to that obtrusive, unchristian skank? Bah. That's why she probably hated the. Because I was thinking, you said she was really offended by the comparison. Why would you be offended to be compared to Amelia Earhart? She's pretty cool, unless you're
yeah,
very conservative.
And also not at the time, right? I mean, at the time she was probably seen as some troublemaker. I mean, a woman that
mm,
flies across, the earth by herself.
Yeah, but this is after she disappeared, so this is at the point where she was actually pretty cool. She was
maybe.
pretty headline news. If someone told me that I was like someone like that, I'd be like, well, interesting, but I wouldn't necessarily immediately be offended.
So apparently, should I offend you a bit?
Go
He
ahead.
asked for permission after poor Irene died. He asked for permission to photograph her body and take fingerprints.
Oh yeah, that's not intrusive at all. No.
It was denied,
Oh
thankfully.
no
But
shit.
No,
You know,
really. How surprising.
also, I don't know where you can ask permission for that.
at the
At the
family
family, I suppose.
probably. Yeah. Hey,
Uh,
Family's probably like, no.
could I please dig up your mom's corpse? I would
I
like to
would like
take.
to take pictures for my Amelia Earhart collection.
Oh god, oh, you just made it worse. You just made it a lot worse.
Yeah, no, but that's the last theory. What do you think of it?
Hmm. Why? Nah, I mean, I don't know. The fact that this guy believes in it, the fact, just maybe. All right, so maybe she did move back to the U.S. Maybe she was relocated and did want to lose the buzz. First of all, I don't think that's a very Amelia Earhart thing to do. To be fair,
That was what I was thinking too. Yeah,
because she sounds like someone who doesn't mind the attention and kind of,
yeah,
the bashful, brash nature would kind of bleed through in the end. And also, just this guy. What the fuck is this guy? What a weirdo. No, just no.
And also, I feel like she would not necessarily be. I mean, she wouldn't choose to survive in captivity,
mm,
I guess. I mean, you never know, right? But from what we've seen so far, she doesn't sound like someone who'd be like very subdued in captivity, you know,
yeah.
reading aloud propaganda. I don't really see that happening.
No, but to be fair,
Mhm.
I mean, Japanese torture was pretty bad. Like, the Japanese weren't very nice in the Second World War.
Oh no, absolutely not. Of course not.
Yeah, it's still an unfortunate situation, and many accounts do have her like more secondhand evidence or third-hand evidence that I've seen, not extremely credible, of people hearing from other people that, oh, my grandfather said she was definitely there and the Japanese killed her, or oh, I was visiting Papua New Guinea and somebody was like, yeah, they had her here, they had her in prison here, but she was being too unruly and they killed her. So a lot of that kind of stuff going around.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like that is at least plausible that she was the idea that she was captured by the Japanese for what reason whatsoever. I mean, she might have been spying. She might also just have been picked up, and like then in the war or something things happened. But I don't know. I
Yeah.
think it is plausible that she did end up in Japanese capture at some point, but then she wouldn't have
Mhm.
survived.
So our three fairies we have here are captured by the sea, captured by the crabs, or captured by the Japanese. And I mean, to wrap it all up today, I just want to hear where we stand finally. Like, I'm going to give you guys a little, a second or two, to speak your thoughts. What do you think of this case? What do you think actually happened? And did any of the theories actually convince you to do convince you of something? Hannah, do you want to start, or do you want to force Han to go first?
I can start, no problem. So I think of all three theories, there's none that really convinces me completely, simply because the others exist. But I think it might have been a little, all theories a bit together that she might have completely lost her track, landed on the wrong island, crashed
And they're eaten
there,
by
been
crabs.
injured, died, been eaten by the crabs, and then
Thank
the
you.
Japanese found the wreck and brought it back to Japan or something.
Where she was being eaten by the crabs when the Japanese came, and the Japanese saved her from the crabs, but then captured her, and then she
No,
was
but they
so
found the
great.
bones,
Yeah,
right?
but that was something else. That was just a dog.
That was Noonan. Come on.
Those were the crabs, crab bones. But and then she was so grateful to the Japanese that she became a Tokyo Rose. That's my theory.
Could be.
Thank you for saving
Yeah.
me from the crabs.
To be fair, those crabs were horrifying.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Dude,
absolutely.
I didn't think it'd be that big. They're bigger than a dog.
I'd start swimming. I'd start swimming if I saw those if I was on an abandoned island, and I'd see those crabs just like scuttling around all around me. I'd probably start swimming.
But you're drowned. Drowning's a horrible way to go too.
Yeah, but it's better than
You
being
don't feel
eaten.
it.
No.
I
No,
think.
apparently you're alive for 5 minutes after you drown.
Really? Oh no, never mind. I take
That's
everything
what I
back
heard.
that I said.
I don't think so.
But then
I think
again, I mean, there was sharks, right? I would take the sharks over the crabs,
But
picking at you.
I guess
But
so.
what if they just died on impact? I mean, that would have been the most humane way to go. To just if they were just gliding towards the surface. If you come from that height, the water is like a wall, so they could just crashed into the water and been dead on impact, and nobody would find them because they would just sink to the bottom, be trapped
Yeah,
in
I
the
guess so.
trapped in the plane.
no. So I'm pretty sure drowning isn't like you are alive for 5 more minutes, but you black out pretty soon. That's the thing. So you
Still.
don't experience. No, not still. Once you're blacked out, you're basically gone already.
I'm a very good thinker.
What does that mean? Are you saying you can think your way around unconsciousness?
Yeah. So
don't
No.
it's very-
No. We'll try that out sometime. I'll hit you in the head with a club, and then you think your way out of being unconscious.
Have you ever been unconscious, Simon?
I don't know.
That's because he thinks his way around it.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry.
He's too smart. He's too smart to be unconscious.
Exactly.
That's it. Everyone who
Yeah.
ever loses consciousness is just dumb.
I guess the best way to end this. Oh no, Han, you still have to tell what do you think happened?
I think it is plausible that
Crabs.
she crashed. I do think
Crabs.
No, not crashed. Not crabs. Jesus. You really want the crabs
Go
to
ahead,
be
sorry.
true, right? You have a sick consciousness, a sick imagination.
Like, it's kind of like grotesquely funny that some person as influential as her met her end being eaten by crabs.
It's not. No, it's just dark. It's just very dark.
Kind of.
Any-
But,
anyway.
sorry, go on. I was breaking your train of
So
thought.
I do think that realistically they would have fallen into the sea, just crashed in the sea, because there is just too much sea out there to like the odds of crashing into the like if you run out of fuel, the odds are higher that you'll crash into the sea than into an island, because there's just not that many islands. And yes, you could.
Yeah.
So I'd go for that, but I wouldn't be surprised if she did crash on an island and then kind of just starve there at some point. I mean, she didn't Robinson Crusoe it, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think that's much harder to do than people think.
Yeah, especially when there's crabs.
To finish it off, if you had to choose, drowning, crabs, or Japanese?
Drowning every time.
Definitely drowning.
Really?
Yeah.
I think drowning would be terrible.
I'm pretty sure. So the worst one of these is absolutely Japanese.
I thought so too. Wow. I mean, yeah. But the crabs are kind of cute, you know?
How
No.
cute.
Have we seen the same picture?
Like this is like saying, oh, but those rabid dogs tearing apart my limbs are kind of cute actually.
I kind of assumed they would do it slowly, like they're like enjoying a fine meal.
That's even worse. So you can agonizingly feel every piece of flesh being scraped off by these giant pincers. That's great. Yeah.
I assumed
sleep
they
on
would
that
eat at
tonight.
their mouths, but
Sorry?
yeah. Okay, never mind. Yes, I will make sure I sleep on that.
I think you'd have a really good dream about it because I feel like you're weirdly into these crabs.
It's just so weird. Did you ever expect her to die by crabs, and that being somewhat plausible?
I don't think it's plausible.
Exactly. Oh, no fun you are.
No.
I suppose that wraps up our crab-filled episode of today. We took a nice glance at Amelia Earhart, a very influential woman. I really enjoyed getting to know a bit of her story, and it would, encourage everybody to do so as well.
She's pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you, Hannah, for coming on today. It was a pleasure having you on this as an unexpected guest, I suppose. So thanks for covering in.
It was a pleasure being here. I learned a lot. I learned a lot, especially about crabs that I never thought were as big as they were. So
Yeah, so let dream on that tonight.
Any final words from yourself too, Han?
Uh, yeah, I'm gonna have a really nice sleep thinking about crabs eating my limbs tonight. It's great. Thank you, Simon. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. A new thing every time. It's just
Yeah, next
keep
time
fresh.
it's gonna be worse next time, right? It just keep getting worse.
I mean, next time we're hoping to do JFK, so we'll see about that.
That's worse.
Anyways, I think that's a tantalizing little hook to leave it on. But we'll catch us all next time. Stay safe, avoid the crabs, and yeah, see you later. Bye.
Bye bye.
bye.